Have you ever felt like you're trying so hard, yet somehow you're still not enough? Not good enough at English, not patient enough, not strong enough to hold your own life together? If you're tired, discouraged, or on the edge of giving up, this video is for you. Because just last week, a small moment in my marriage here in the United States showed me why we lose motivation, and how we can gently, slowly, and honestly find it again. A quiet beginning. Imagine waking up to a morning so quiet that your brain starts questioning whether your alarm has secretly resigned from its job. That's how my week in the United States began. A strange, heavy kind of silence, the kind your body notices long before your mind catches up. And it's funny, isn't it? You can spend hours practicing slow English listening, but still fail to hear your own emotions when they start whispering or shouting inside you. Your brain loves doing that, hiding the important stuff like it's minimizing tabs on a browser you desperately need. That morning I was making coffee, practicing a few slow English lines, something I do every day to warm up my mouth and my mind. But the words felt stiff, almost delayed, as if my tongue knew something was off before I did. The air felt slightly tense, that subtle shift you only learn to recognize after living with someone long enough. No words, no looks, just a certain rhythm in their footsteps that tells you how they feel. Psychologists call this emotional attunement. Your brain syncing with the person you love through tiny cues you don't consciously notice. And when that sync falls out of tune, your body reacts instantly, like someone changed the gravity of the room. That was my kitchen that morning. A soft, nearly sad quiet filling a space where we normally played gentle music and shared small conversations. You might think it was just a normal morning, but normal mornings are precisely where marriage begins to tell its bigger story. Living in America, where everything is fast, loud, demanding, makes these slow moments stand out even more. They're like subtle warnings that the week ahead may not be simple. Not dramatic, not explosive, but the kind of emotional challenge that lingers, that makes you examine yourself, your patience, your connection. And here's the strange part. That quiet morning would eventually teach me something about love, resilience, and even why so many people lose motivation when learning English. Because losing motivation doesn't begin with a big failure. It begins with tiny disconnects, like this one, unnoticed, creeping into your days. I didn't know that a single silent moment would open a week full of questions, realizations, and small breakthroughs. I didn't know it would push me to slow down, not just in my marriage, but in the way I speak, listen, and understand English itself. But that's how life works. It never announces its lessons. It just hands you a quiet morning and waits to see if you'll pay attention. And sometimes one unspoken sigh is enough to shift the entire week. The small argument. There's a strange thing your brain does. It can forget where you left your keys, but it will never forget the exact tone of someone you love when they're upset. That evening, after the quiet morning that already felt like a warning sign, a tiny disagreement between my wife and me slipped into our living room, so small that an outsider wouldn't even call it an argument. But your nervous system doesn't care about size. It reacts to emotional friction the way smoke alarms react to burnt toast. Dramatically, immediately, and a little too loudly. That IT started with something ordinary. We were discussing the schedule for the week, who would pick up groceries, who would handle a small family errand, who would cook dinner. Simple things. Everyday things. But marriage doesn't crack at the big events. It cracks at the everyday misunderstandings that pile up quietly like dust you forget to sweep. One mismatched expectation, one misheard sentence, one I thought you said. And suddenly the room feels warmer, tighter. And here's the ironic part. I was trying to speak slowly using clear English phrases, partly to practice, partly to keep the conversation calm. Yet the more carefully I spoke, the more clumsy everything sounded. It's almost comedic how practicing English can make you hyper-aware of your own voice, while completely ignoring the emotional storm brewing beside you. Neuroscientists explain this as cognitive overload. Your brain trying to manage language, tone, memory, and emotion at once. It's like asking a phone with 2% battery to run 4 apps simultaneously. She said one thing. I responded with another. And then came the moment, you know, the one when the conversation turns quiet, not because it's resolved, but because both people retreat into their own thoughts. That silence is sharper than any argument. It has weight, temperature, texture. Part of me wanted to fix it immediately. Another part of me, the tired part, wanted to pretend it wasn't important. But marriage has this ruthless honesty. Even the smallest tension becomes a mirror. And the mirror was asking me the question no one likes to face: was I really listening? Or was I just hearing words? People lose motivation in English learning for the same reason they lose their footing in relationships. Not because they can't do it, but because they get overwhelmed, distracted, or emotionally misaligned. You skip one day of practice, one moment of understanding, and suddenly you feel behind. In marriage, you skip one conversation, one apology, and suddenly the distance feels bigger than it is. That night, the argument didn't explode. It didn't even escalate. But it lingered like a small pebble in your shoe, reminding you that something needs attention before it becomes pain. And sometimes the smallest pebble changes your entire path. Learning to listen. There's a funny trick your brain plays on you. It convinces you that hearing and listening are the same thing. But they're not. Hearing is automatic. Your ears do it even when you're half asleep. Listening, however, is a full-body workout. It demands attention, humility, and the willingness to admit that you might be wrong. And let's be honest, nobody's brain enjoys that. The day after our small argument, I caught myself replaying the conversation in my mind, the way you replay an English sentence you're not sure you pronounce correctly. My thoughts kept looping. Did I rush her? Did I misunderstand? Did I answer too quickly? It felt like reviewing language mistakes, except the grammar was emotional, not verbal. Scientists call this self-auditing. Your mind scanning for missteps the same way a language learner scans for mispronounced consonants. And much like in English practice, the moment you slow down enough to notice the mistake, you've already become better. So that afternoon, instead of trying to force everything back to normal, I did something strange for me. I stayed quiet. Not the cold, distant kind of quiet. The intentional quiet. The kind where you shut down your internal monologue long enough to notice the tiny signals around you. Her sigh when she walked past. The way she avoided eye contact, not out of anger but worry. The way she paused before speaking, as if choosing her words carefully. Those were things I had missed the day before, not because I didn't care, but because I was multitasking my feelings, my English practice, and my stress like a badly configured computer. Your brain can pretend it's good at multitasking, but neuroscience has already exposed the truth. It can't. When you split your focus, something important always gets dropped out. I realized something simple, almost embarrassingly simple. I had been practicing slow English, but not practicing slow love. Not slow understanding. Not slow presence. My listening was fast, impatient, solution-focused, like rushing through a language exercise just to check it off a list. So that evening, when we finally sat down together, I tried something new. I listened the way I listened to an English mentor. Patient, curious, without assuming I already knew the meaning behind every word. I let her finish her sentences without mentally preparing my response. I watched her face. I matched her pace. And here's the surprising part. The moment I shifted how I listened, the tension softened. Not completely. Not magically. But enough for us to feel like we were on the same frequency again. Because when you really listen, even quietly, your presence becomes louder than your words. A walk to remember. Your brain behaves strangely when emotions run high. It thinks movement will fix everything. Like taking a walk can magically solve your marriage, your anxiety, and your English pronunciation all at once. And sometimes, hilariously, it's not wrong. A few days after the tension settled into something quieter, my wife suggested we go for a walk in a small park near our home. Nothing special. Nothing dramatic. Just a simple walk. But simple walks have this mystical power. They turn two people facing a problem into two people facing the same direction. The air was crisp, the kind that wakes you up without asking for permission. Birds were making those oddly enthusiastic morning sounds that make you question why they're so energetic when you're barely functional. As we walked, the rhythm of our steps slowly synced. An old familiar harmony that our emotions had forgotten but our bodies remembered. Neuroscientists describe this as behavioral mirroring. A natural sign of connection that happens even when your mind is still sorting things out. First, we didn't talk. You know that peaceful silence couples share when words feel too heavy, but being together feels just right. My brain kept trying to deliver dramatic speeches, apology speeches, future planning speeches, emotional TED Talks, yet none of them felt real. So I stayed quiet. And she stayed quiet. And somehow it wasn't awkward. Then, out of nowhere, she laughed at a squirrel doing something incredibly stupid, trying to bury a nut in a frozen patch of ground. That laugh cracked something open inside me. It reminded me that love is often just shared laughter at tiny, pointless things, so I said a simple sentence, slow and clear. Almost like an English practice line. I don't want us to lose each other over small things. Not dramatic. Not poetic. Just human. She looked at me with that soft expression. The one that says, I've been thinking the same thing but didn't know how to start. We talked slowly without rushing to conclusions or defenses. Every sentence felt like taking another step forward. I explained how overwhelmed I'd felt balancing English practice, work, and the pressure I quietly put on myself. She explained how she felt unheard, not unloved. There's a difference, and it's a big one. The more we walked, the lighter everything felt. Movement does that. It tricks your nervous system into thinking progress is happening, so your emotions start to follow. Step by step, word by word, we found our way back to the version of us that laughs easily and forgives quickly. A simple walk. A small moment. But sometimes the smallest movements create the biggest emotional shifts. Because walking side by side is often the first step to understanding heart to heart. Dinner that healed. There's something almost suspicious about how much emotional power a simple dinner can hold. Your brain can dismiss it as just a meal, but your nervous system knows better. It knows that sitting across from someone you love, with no distractions, no rushing, no half-finished conversations, is basically couples therapy disguised as food. That night, after our long walk reset the emotional temperature between us, we decided to cook dinner together. Nothing fancy, just comfort food. The kind that makes you feel safe before you even take the first bite. Cooking beside her felt different this time. Slower, softer, more intentional. She chopped vegetables with that focused but relaxed face she has, and I found myself watching the way her shoulders moved, loosening in a way they hadn't earlier in the week. It's funny how your body reveals the truth before your words do. Scientists call this somatic communication. Basically, your muscles gossip about your emotions before your mouth does. I practiced my English while cooking, but in a way that blended naturally into the moment. Slow phrases, simple sentences, the kind that let me express feelings without tripping over complicated grammar. I'm glad we talked today. I'm trying to be more patient with English and with us. I want to understand you better. Speaking slowly didn't make me feel awkward this time. It made me feel grounded. And something beautiful happened. She matched my pace. Not just my language pace, but my emotional one. She responded softly, choosing her words the way you choose ingredients in a recipe. Carefully, lovingly, with intention. We weren't fixing every problem. We weren't unraveling every knot in one night. But we were making space for each other again, one sentence at a time. Dinner smelled like garlic and warmth. The table felt like neutral ground. Not a battlefield, not a negotiation stage, but a place where we could exist without pressure. When we finally sat down, she reached for my hand. Not dramatically, not ceremonially, just naturally. Like her body remembered something her mind had been too tired to express all week. I know you're trying, she said quietly. And that sentence, it landed like a full-body exhale. You don't realize how much tension you've been holding until someone acknowledges your effort. Not your results, not your perfection. Just your effort. I told her I knew she had been carrying more than she let on to. Life in the US can feel like an endless to-do list, and marriage can become another task if you're not careful. But that night, dinner wasn't a task. It was a pause. A healing one. We talked about small things, big things, future things. And the more we talked, the more I realized something essential. Honest communication is a skill just like English. You learn it slowly. You practice it daily. And when you mess up, you try again. By the time we finished eating, the heaviness of the week had softened into something warm and manageable. A meal had done what arguments couldn't, quietly bringing us back to center, because sometimes healing arrives not as a grand gesture, but as a shared dinner and a hand gently holding yours. The moment of truth. Your brain has a terrible sense of timing. It loves to deliver emotional breakthroughs at the most unexpected moments. Like when you're putting dishes away or staring at the fridge wondering why you opened it. For me, the moment of truth arrived the next morning. Not during a deep conversation, not during a dramatic embrace, but while I was folding laundry. Yes, laundry. Apparently, my nervous system chose a pile of warm towels as the stage for clarity. As I folded each piece, something clicked. A quiet realization. I wasn't tired of English. I wasn't tired of marriage. I wasn't tired of life in the United States. I was tired of trying to perform everything perfectly. Perfect communication. Perfect patience. Perfect progress. Perfect English. Perfect husband. Perfect everything. And perfection, according to every psychologist who has ever written anything, is a motivation killer dressed up as ambition. The more I thought about it, the more obvious it became. The pressure I put on myself had leaked into my relationship. My wife wasn't frustrated because of English or chores or schedules. She was frustrated because I wasn't really present. I was physically there, emotionally there, but mentally sprinting through invisible checklists. It's hard to love someone who is always halfway somewhere else, even when their body is right in front of you. And here's the uncomfortable truth your brain doesn't want you to hear. Multitasking your emotions is just emotional avoidance with better branding. You can't deepen connection with your partner while also mentally rehearsing English pronunciation. You can't fully understand someone when half your mind is planning tomorrow. The brain may pretend it's efficient, but emotionally, it's a disaster. So I sat down. Just sat. With the half-folded laundry beside me. And I let myself feel everything I had been rushing past. The frustration. The fear of not being good enough. The pressure of living in a fast-paced country where everyone walks like they're late for something. And beneath all of that, the real truth. I wanted to love well. I wanted to communicate better. I wanted to slow down, not because life demanded it, but because love required it. When she walked into the room, I didn't give a speech. I didn't over-explain. I just said one sentence, slow and sincere. I'm sorry. I want to do better. With you, not just for you. Her face softened instantly. Not because the sentence was perfect, but because the vulnerability was real. Emotional honesty has an accent everyone understands. She sat beside me, leaned her shoulder against mine and whispered, "We're learning. Together." That was the moment. The quiet, ordinary, profoundly healing moment. No dramatic music. No sweeping camera angle. Just two people finally standing still long enough to understand each other. Sometimes the truth doesn't arrive like lightning. Sometimes it arrives as simply as someone sitting next to you while a half-folded shirt waits patiently on your lap. And that's enough to change everything. Rebuilding slowly. Your nervous system has this adorable habit of panicking when life gets too calm. After that honest moment during the laundry incident, my brain immediately whispered, "Great! Now don't mess it up again." Classic. Even when things start going well, your mind can't resist imagining worst-case scenarios like it's auditioning for a dramatic TV show. But rebuilding a relationship, or rebuilding your motivation to learn English, never happens through fear. It happens through small, consistent actions that slowly rebuild trust, connection, and rhythm. The next few days felt different. Not perfect. Not magically fixed. But grounded. We both made micro adjustments, the kind that don't look impressive from the outside but feel monumental on the inside. She softened her tone when she was overwhelmed. I slowed down my responses instead of jumping into solution mode. We both paused more often, not to avoid conflict, but to understand each other better. There's a psychological principle called shared regulation, which basically means your nervous systems calm each other down when you function as a team instead of opponents. And that's what started happening. A tiny example. One morning I was practicing slow English phrases out loud, and she gently corrected my intonation. Not in a teacher-student way, but in a "I love you and we're in this together" way. That one correction felt more supportive than 100 compliments. Later that week, she had a stressful day at work. Normally, I would have tried to fix it, analyze it, break it down like a language exercise. But this time I simply listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't rush. I didn't mentally translate her emotions into tasks. I listened the way you listen to someone reading a story slowly, absorbing, not judging. And when she finished, she smiled with this relieved expression that told me everything I needed to know. Presence is more healing than advice. We started doing small routines together again. Making tea after dinner, sharing 10-minute walks, practicing English phrases as a pair, even laughing at our terrible attempts to mimic American accents. These weren't solutions, they were reconnections. Like stitching tiny threads back into a fabric that had stretched but never torn. The more intentional we became, the clearer everything felt. Learning English suddenly became easier because I wasn't forcing it. Our marriage felt lighter because I wasn't performing it. Even life in the US felt less overwhelming, as if slowing down emotionally had somehow slowed the whole world around me too. And here's the gentle truth. Rebuilding doesn't require grand gestures. Just attention. Just consistency. Just honesty. You don't need fireworks to fix a relationship. You need someone willing to stay, to try, to breathe with you through the small moments. Because slow rebuilding isn't a weakness. It's the most sustainable kind of love, and the most sustainable kind of learning. The moment you ours comes a moment in every life when silence becomes heavier than words. When staying the same feels more painful than stepping into the unknown. This is that moment for you. Not someday in the distant future, not when conditions feel perfect, not when others finally understand you. Now. Right here, right where you are sitting, watching, breathing, doubting, and yet still hoping for something more. You may not realize it yet, but the very fact that you are still here means that your story has not ended. It means there is a part of you, quiet, steady, persistent, that refuses to disappear. Maybe you have spent the last months carrying invisible weight, pretending to be fine while privately collapsing under expectations that no one sees. Maybe you have been replaying the same mistakes in your mind, convincing yourself that you are broken, tired, or simply too late to change anything. But listen carefully. Your life has not been waiting for a perfect version of you. It has been waiting for an honest one. This is where everything shifts. Not because the world suddenly becomes easier, but because you decide you are no longer willing to abandon yourself. Strength is rarely loud. It often begins as a whisper, a small decision, a single breath that says, "I will try again." And from that decision, everything else becomes possible. Imagine looking back on this moment years from now. Imagine remembering the confusion, the fear, the exhaustion, and realizing this was the turning point. This was when you stopped running away from your life and finally ran toward it. You may not have all the answers right now, but answers come to people who move, people who act, people who refuse to disappear. So take this step. Even if your hands shake. Show up for your dreams, even if your voice trembles. Growth has never required perfection, only willingness. And you have that. You are here watching this, searching, questioning, reaching for a reason to keep going. That is not weakness. It is the purest form of courage. This world does not need another flawless person. It needs someone alive, awake, and willing to start again at zero. It needs someone like you. Someone who has been tested, someone who has fallen, someone who understands what it means to rise from places they thought would break them. Your next chapter begins the moment you choose it. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Now stand up. Take the step. Let this be the moment you rise.